Okay, so this is going to be 2.3, multiplying and dividing integers, and also a lot more practice on substitution as well. As we get better with that, it becomes second nature. All right, multiplying and dividing numbers with the same sign, meaning they're both positive or both negative, your answers are always positive. If the signs are different, meaning one is negative and one is positive, then the answers are always negative. So if you look at these two, these are both positive, so we get a positive. Both negative, so we get a positive. Fraction is also division. Negative divided by negative, positive, and positive divided by positive, positive 5. Over here, it's the same examples, but just one of them is negative, one of them is positive, and our answers come out as negative. All right, so for this section right here, for A, B, C, and D, if we're looking at these, all I want to know is whether these are going to be positive or negative. And again, you can plug these into your calculator and get your final answer, but we're just focusing on whether they're positive or negative. Because we have and remember, when numbers are connected by just a parentheses, that means the operation is multiplication. So in this case, we have a positive 4 and a negative 6, so the answer is going to be negative, because it's one of each. Here we have a negative 10 times a negative 5, because there's two negatives. When we multiply them, our answer will come out as positive. C, and we have two negatives being multiplied by each other. Answer would be positive. And here we have a negative 2/3 being multiplied by a positive 3/4, so that answer would be negative as well. All right, so pretty much as you multiply negatives together, every two negatives you multiply together, you get a positive answer. If there's three odd negatives being multiplied together, you would get a negative answer. As we go through these substitutions, sometimes you can just look at a problem and say whether it's going to be positive or negative, which is kind of what we did up here. So you have some prior knowledge to try to help you get through those problems. All right, so here we're going to just practice a little bit more with substitution. One thing we did the other day that I noticed when I was helping a student, and an easy way to set these up is I write that problem, and then instead of writing the C and the D, I put parentheses in for those. So we have our problem, and then we have to put in for C and D. For C, we put negative 8, and for D, we put negative 7. All right, so now as we look at this, we know that these are going to be positives, and then our positives we multiplied by a negative. So our final answer is going to be negative. At this point, we can just type these into our calculator. So again, as I get the substitution in here, now I type in what I see, negative, two parentheses, my negative 8, close out the parentheses again, negative 7, close it out, and we get negative 56 as our answer. All right, over here, again, I am going to do my negative 2, negative 3, and then in parentheses, I have two parentheses that I'm putting in. So what are my substitute numbers? Negative 8, negative 7. Now, as we do these, it does the math for you, right? Because our calculator will know if two parentheses together make that. So parentheses, negative 2, oops. Parentheses, negative 2, close that off, other parentheses, negative 3, and now I'm actually just using my keyboard to type this in. Two parentheses, negative 8, close that off, do another one, negative 7, close that off twice, and we have 336 as our answer. Again, you can pause here and try this one. So as I type this in, I'm putting my C in parentheses. Then I have this parenthesis and negative, and then whatever my D is in parentheses. So my C is negative 8, and my D is negative 7. And that helps you. If you do that, it's going to help you not miss those negative signs as well. So we can go ahead and type that in. So parentheses, negative 8, and a parenthesis, then we have that negative, and then parentheses, negative 7. Close that out. We have negative 56 as our answer. All right, so on the next page, you just have a little bit more practice. Again here, as we're dividing, just another way to look at it. I just want you to say, are they positive or are they going to be negative? So over here, we have a negative divided by a positive. That's going to be a negative answer. Negative divided by a negative, it's going to be positive. Positive divided by negative, going to be negative. So your final answers are going to be negative on those. So again, it's just another way of looking at it, more practice. Okay, two more here substitution problems that we're going to do. Again, these are a little bit longer, so I'm going to type these in again with the parentheses like we just did. So I'm going to do 3 times my x, which I don't know yet. I do, but I'm going to wait to put it in, divided by parentheses 2 and then my z plus my y, which I don't know, divided by 10. Alright, so now let's go through and put in our x, our z, and our y. So our x is 8, our z is negative 3, and our y is negative 5. So this way you, hopefully that you find that a little bit easier when substituting. Alright, so now what we can do is we can type this in to our calculator. Now remember, for this Desmos calculator, what you're going to see is when I hit divided by, it's going to make it into a fraction. So we have to make sure we use our arrow to not just load up the top or the bottom of a fraction. So I'm going to start here. So I'm going to do 3 times 8, and I'm representing that times with parentheses. Then I'm going to hit my divided by, and that's okay because I'm going to divide it by this. So parentheses 2, parentheses negative 3, and there's 2 out there. Close that out. So now I'm going to go to the right, in my right arrow. I'm going to hit my plus, and then I'm going to do my negative 5, parentheses, and then I have my divided by 10. So I can leave it like that. That's good. This is a negative 4.5 or a negative 9 over 2 as our answer. Alright, so now we're going to substitute this. So as I write this, separate these a little bit. So I have my 2, and then whatever I'm going to put in parentheses, which would be my z, plus my x, I'm locating that by parentheses, divided by 2 times my y, which would be negative 5. We'll put parentheses, that would be negative 5. So then as I go through this problem, I'm replacing my parentheses. So z is negative 3, x is 8, and y would be negative 5. Alright, so then as we go over here, we're going to type that in. So I'm starting with the top, 2 parentheses negative 3, plus parentheses 8, then divided by, so wait a second, that doesn't look right, does it? It should be the whole thing over. So here's what we're going to have to do for this. This is this is a little bit of an extra step. But because this is all on the top, I need to group that on the top like that so that it stays together. So over here, I'm going to put a parenthesis around this and a parenthesis around that. Now, as I divide this, it's going to divide the whole thing because it's grouping it for us. So then I have 2 parentheses, negative 5. And my answer would be negative 0.2 or negative 1/5. So just be aware too, as we set up a fraction problem like that, again, as you type it onto this calculator especially, if it doesn't look like it, it's not it, right? Except for these little sections where it's dividing by 10, it's going to make it as a fraction. Okay. So the last part that we need to cover with this section is exponents. And this is, again, why I'm hammering on the parentheses. So if the number that's being raised to a power is not in parentheses, meaning the negative is outside and the 3 is here, this is reading it as the negative of 3 being multiplied 4 times. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. So as you multiply those, there's 1 negative and 3 positives, basically. Or you can think of it as 4 positives, but then the answer is going to be negative. Whereas in here, if it's in parentheses, we're multiplying negative 3 4 times. And as you type those in, you can see here, especially when, or only when we have an even numbered exponent, that's really going to have a different outcome on your answer. So again, as we are putting things in parentheses and using powers for it, we have to make sure that we are using or utilizing parentheses in there. Again, so then you can use your calculators on this and see the difference as these are coming out for your answer. So again, -4 to the third. We can raise that to the third power with that A to the B button. We get -64. -2 in parentheses to this fourth power. So again, parenthesis, -2. A to the B, 4. 16. Let's scroll over here. Okay, now we have, this is just calculator practice. Parentheses, -0.3. And then we're going to square that. 0.9 or 9 over 100. And again, notice how it's positive, right? Actually, since this is a decimal, I'll leave it as a decimal. So that'd be 0.09. Then over here, how are we going to make this look? Let's clear this out. We are going to do our negative and then our parenthesis. And we can go right here, or you can do 3 divided by 4. Either one. 3 over 4. Close out that parenthesis. And then we're going to square that. We can do this one or that and then press 2. And that gives us -0.5625. But because this is a fraction, I'm going to leave that in fraction form, which would be -9 over 16. So I'd like to do one practice problem with these types of problems with exponents. So let's say I have -x squared plus 3y to the fourth. And let's say I say x equals 2 and y equals -1. All right, so how I'm going to input this? Let's do exactly what we did before. So I'm going to say negative, and then in parentheses, whatever x is, and then that square goes outside, plus 3, and then my y, I don't know what it is, I'm putting parentheses, and that 4 on the outside. We got to make sure when we're inputting this, the exponent stays on the outside. All right, so now we can go in and type in whatever we had for x. So in this case, it's 2, and this would be -1. So again, as we go to our calculator, we can type that in just as we see it. So we can say negative, and then parentheses, whoops, let me do this, parentheses 2, close that out, and then square it, and then we're going to add 3, parentheses, -1, and then we're going to raise that to the fourth power. And we get -1 as our answer. All right, so just more substitution. There's going to be some of that on the assignment as well. And I think this new method of putting in the parentheses for the exponents and then plugging those in afterwards is going to help with some of the confusion with substitution.